Oh, yeah. Welcome in, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me here on Cream of the Crop, a fantasy hockey podcast presented by Apples and Geno's, the number one fruit-based fantasy hockey podcast out there. That's confirmed, and we feel good about that. I'm your host, Blake Creamer. Give me a follow over on X at Blake Creamer AG, Blue Sky at Blake Creamer AG. We're doing stuff over there, and that feels nice as well. I got a special episode for you here today, and I got my brother in fantasy, Jared from Fired Up Fantasy. He's ripping stuff out there on YouTube. He's smashing out in these fantasy hockey streets. You got to check out his YouTube. He's doing stuff over there. Buddy, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, Blake. Thank you so much for having me on. You're having a pretty good conversation before this, a little introductory stuff. But, like I said, I've been following you guys for a minute now. Love the channel, love the pod, and excited to talk about some steals and then also some busts as well. Lots of players to go through.
Yeah, absolutely, buddy. It's I love around this time of the season, because we have a good data set that we can actually analyze and feel good about that. Whereas like 10, 15 games in, we're like, sure, I think this is going to happen, but we got a lot of information here, so I'm excited about that. First off, like, tell us about your fantasy hockey journey, Jared and I did have a conversation before this, so we're going to repeat everything and we're going to pretend like we've never
verbatim. We're going to repeat everything verbatim.
Exactly. That's good content. Yeah. Tell me what got you into this and kind of what gets you excited about fantasy hockey.
Yeah, absolutely. I did also want to say, you mentioned like the first, like having a nice sample size. You remember the first 10, 15 games when Evgeny Malkin was leading the league in points? That was a fun time.
And I felt good about that because that's a player I called as a sleeper,
Yes.
And then he literally fell asleep. So I don't know what happened there.
Yeah. But yeah, in terms of my fantasy hockey journey, like I was telling you, I grew up a Canucks fan, even though I'm in Ontario. 2006
good boy.
was loved the logo on NHL 06 on GameCube, became a Canucks fan. Obviously the Stanley Cup loss was devastating when I was like 10 or 11. I was bawling my eyes out. And I think after that, stopped really watching hockey, got into basketball. And then 2020, my friends were doing a fantasy hockey league, and I hadn't watched hockey in like 6 years. And I was like, all right, sure. I've never done fantasy before. This sounds fun. And I just became instantly addicted. I was, sending 3 a.m., 4 a.m. trade proposals to them, which they weren't happy about. I was waking up at 3 a.m. to pick up waiver wire players. And I just realized that this is what I love to do. I love fantasy hockey. And then, 2 years later, I just said, hey, like, let's start doing YouTube fantasy hockey content. Like, it's a very niche thing. There's not a lot of people doing fantasy hockey on YouTube. And I just started doing it. Like I said to you earlier, the first videos were rough. The music was way too loud. And, I would read off a script because I was just like, I don't know what to do. But, just trying to work in it every day and just falling in love with it. And we talked about our process a little bit. At first it was just like peripherals. Okay. Like, this is how you gain a massive edge against your casual league mates, understand which players put up shot sets and blocks. And you could just win off of that. Unless you're in like a very serious league, like that's how you win against your casual league mates from high school, university, whatever. But as we talked about earlier, looking more into advanced stats, shooting percentage, on a shooting percentage, IPP, deployment, understanding power play formations, all that stuff has been pretty crucial to understanding, which players have value, looking at ADP, different platforms. I still have a lot to learn, especially, this year, a lot of lessons learned for myself. But yeah, I love it. I love it. And you guys, I love the pod, man. I know I said that again, but the pod's great. And I have a lot to learn from you guys as well. A lot of the initial stuff that I learned in the summer, was looking at the pod and being like, oh, okay, these are some of the advanced stats I need to look at, like ICF per 60, ISCF per 60, looking at, shot attempts, scoring chances, stuff like that. So yeah, did a deep dive into that in the summer, and I'm going to keep trying to learn.
I love that, buddy. Appreciate the kind words. Like, that goes both ways. And it's always surprising to me that people listen to this. You know what I mean? I know I like it a lot. I'm like, this is great. This is a passion of mine, but like, I love hearing that people listen to it and get something from it, because I'm the same way with your content. Like, you're crushing over there on YouTube, some of the best YouTube fantasy hockey content there is, in my opinion. So you're doing a really great job over there. But buddy, we got to get to business. We got busts, we got surprises. And anyways, that's what we're talking about today here with Jared of Fired Up Fantasy. all the players that have hurt us and hurt our feelings this year. Big time busts, giggity. And then we'll talk about some nice surprises that we've seen here. So let's get into that, my man. Let's start with some of the busts here. And I want to talk about a player here and get your take on him as well, Matthew Tkachuk. And the reason I'm bringing up Matthew Tkachuk as a bust is obviously, he's got a 78-point pace, but his ADP was 11 in draft season. And that's kind of how I'm defining a bust, is like a guy we were excited about in the offseason, a guy we drafted high, and a guy is really not hitting his mark here, right? So digging in on Matt Tkachuk, like, first off, do you have Matt Tkachuk anywhere, Jared?
I have him on drafters. I did 115 drafts there, best ball tournament.
Jeez.
And I would say I'd have to check. I think it was something like 12%. Like, it's not like I didn't, target him. Like, it wasn't like a target, a guy that I was like reaching for, but like I drafted a good amount of them. So, I was expecting him to bounce back. So definitely disappointing so far. I think there is an opportunity for him to bounce back here, but there's a chance that what we saw, 2 years ago and on Calgary in his last season there was more of an outlier season for him.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something weird. Like Nate and I've been talking about this year, but he seems like he's almost sort of a supplementary piece there now. Like, obviously, the Sex Panther, Sam Reinhart, he's going off, and he's been going off for a couple seasons now. And it seems like that's kind of their engine now. It's Barkov, it's Reinhart, as opposed to the first year Tkachuk was there, where he popped off for 100 points and was kind of, he was the engine. So it's weird stuff. Like, I've noticed so far this year, shots on goal per 60 for Matt Tkachuk, down across the board in all strengths. Time on ice is down, very weird. And I think it's interesting that Florida has sort of loaded up their top line as of late. Like, it's Matt Tkachuk, Reinhart, and Barkov. And I don't think that really benefits Matt Tkachuk, to be honest, because it's less touches for him, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I mean, the one thing that you could argue it is good for him. The problem with him this year, I think, has been a number of things. You mentioned the shot pace. That's pretty consistent around the league as well. I think there was a stat that showed that shots across the league was like the lowest in like 20 years or something like that. But yeah, he's on a 222 shot pace, which is the lowest ever for him on Florida.
Yeah.
You mentioned the ice time as well. It's the lowest, I believe, that it's been on Florida. And I think he normally played on a line with Sam Bennett and Verhaeghe, who have had not good years, right? Like, these are guys that are underperforming. So I think that's affected him primarily. And I mean, only time will tell if that top line is going to stick and if it's going to help, right? Like, I wouldn't say it would be bad for him, right? Like, maybe less touches, maybe less vocal point in the offense. Like, playing with Barkov and Reinhart's probably a good thing in terms of point production, but it's not like they've been doing much. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, some of those guys like Verhaeghe and Bennett are going to need to get going, especially if they mix up the lines again for him to start producing. And his ice time, like, if it's not 20 minutes, like, he might not put up 90 plus points, right? If it's around 18 minutes where it is right now, this could sort of be the average for Tkachuk, like an 82 to 85 point player.
Yeah, it's interesting to me too, like, just in terms of that line, that's something that I dug into a little bit here in the offseason, is the construction of a line and what makes a line good. And I'm trying to see, with this particular line, like, usually based on what I looked at, you need to have sort of a center that, is really good defensively, is able to help break the puck out of the zone. You need to have a guy, like a net front guy, a forecheck guy. And then you need a guy to carry the puck in, right? A guy to rush the puck in and set the play up. And it's weird to me, this line of Barkov, Reinhart, and Tkachuk, I'm not sure it makes sense. Because I think Barkov and Tkachuk sort of do the same thing. And it's Florida's offense. I don't know if you've noticed this, but they're really big on the cycle forecheck offense. Their rush offense is not great. So they're all about dumping it in and just creating a bunch of chaos. Whereas Tkachuk is about rushing the puck in. And this year he's done that a lot less, which is really strange. So I don't know. I don't know what it all means, but especially on that line, like, that's what Reinhart and Barkov are doing. They're dumping it in, and they're amazing at forechecking, Barkov in particular. So yeah, I kind of hope they go back to the Bennett, Verhaeghe, Tkachuk line. I think there's more potential there. While we're on that subject, talk to me about Carter Verhaeghe, because that's a player that you've kind of brought to the table here as a bust, isn't it?
Yeah, he has been very disappointing. He was one of my most drafted players this year in best ball, because I just, like, I'm all about value. Like, for me, it's like his ADP was like 60 or 70, and I'm looking at a guy who Last year was the first year that he was on the first power play line for the entire season. And I'm looking at a guy who's had very good even strength protection, right? Like that's always a positive sign for me. So in my mind, I look at a guy here that loves to shoot the puck. So he has that advantage peripheral wise, loves to score goals. Like he had like 42 goals 2 years ago. And that was, half the season not being on the first unit. So yeah, very, very disappointing stuff. I wanted to just take a look at the goals here for him. I'm just looking at my notes here. For Haggy. Yeah, 11 goals in 51 games.
Yeah, it's gross.
He's on a 17 goal, 56 point pace. And this is despite averaging the highest ice time of his career. Just to list off some names here that have more goals than him. Pavel Dorofeev, Alexei Protas, Jonathan Huberdeau, Stefan Nason, Jack Rozovic, Anthony Cirelli, Connor McMichael, Jason Zucker, Jaden Schwartz, Brett Howden. That's a nice one. Miko Granlund, Adam Gaudette, Morgan Geeky, Nick Paul, Ryan Donato, Michael Bunting, Bobby McMahon, Evgeny Dadonov, Kiefer Sherwood, Will Coulee, Tyson Forster, Kyle Palmieri, Charlie Coyle, Warren Fogle, Jesper Boquist, who was on the same team, Anton Lundell was on the same team. They all have more goals than Carter Verhaeghe this year.
That's so painful, man. That's a hard listen.
Yeah, it's tough, man. It is tough. However, I think the underlying metrics look good, right? Like he is shooting the puck very similarly to how he normally shoots. And honestly, if you're looking at his shooting percentage, it's half his career rate. So if he was shooting at his career rate, I believe he would have 21 goals, which would put him at 21 goals and 45 points in 51 games. And that would be like a normal season for Verhaeghe. Like you'd be pretty happy with that. So I think he's just snake bitten. Like I've seen a couple of Florida Panthers games hitting the post quite a bit. But the main concern is being on the third line. Like that's not a recipe for success. They've had some success that third line, Jesper Broquist and Anton Lundell, but like it's just not good, right? Like he's been power play one for the majority of the season, but there's also some games where they put Mackie Samoskevich on the power play one.
Make sense.
It just doesn't make sense. And it is concerning, right? Like, is he going to hold on to power play one? Who knows? Is he going to be third line for the entire season? Like, I still like him as a buy low. Like, I would target him in a trade. But if he's third line the rest of the year, like, the ceiling's going to be massively capped.
Yep. Agree with all that. I think he was just unlucky at the start of the year. Like that happens to many players, right? It came out the gates a bit slow. Shooting percentage is way down. And he was definitely a buy low at that point. But then when your shooting percentage is low and then you get moved to the third line, that's not really allowing you to the opportunity to get that back, right? So we're happy with power play one. And he is a buy low, no question. Like, even just digging in on his metrics, Nate's talked about it lots, but even on the season, like 29th overall in shots to goal per 60, very nice. And 8th overall in individual scoring chances for per 60. He's cooking there, right? But like you said, the problem is deployment. We got to get him off that third line. And I don't know, what do you think? I really don't see this rest of season, him on the third line. It doesn't make sense to me. Not that it couldn't happen, but I think even this last game that Florida played, it wasn't good. They got to do something there. They got to break up this top line, get Tkachuk back with Verhaeghe. That's my thoughts that they will kind of do that. And I think moving forward, I see Carter Verhaeghe as like a 70-point player, 70-point pace moving forward. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a good, reasonable assessment. Like the Panthers offense hasn't been good. I think they've been getting some bad luck. Like their PDO is pretty low.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it would make sense for them to go back to what they normally do, what has worked in the last 2 years, which is you either put somebody up with Barkov and Reinhart, like Rodriguez, or maybe you put Verhaeghe, right? In the playoffs, they're running Verhaeghe, Barkov, Reinhart, or just do like Bennett, Tkachuk, Verhaeghe. Just run that and see how it goes. But right now, not too happy about it. I would trade for him though, like you said, like he is a buy low.
Yep, absolutely. What about Matt Tkachuk? What do you think his point pace is rest of the season?
I mean, that's tough, right? Like there's nothing that really stands out to me in terms of like screaming buy low. Like I want to see him start shooting the puck more. I think he might just be like a point per game player for the rest of the year. I don't know. Do you think he's going to start popping off if maybe they go back to like a regular top six that they normally do?
I think so. I see him as a little higher than point per game, but I think that's a safe assessment. And like just the way he's sort of being deployed and the inefficiency that the Panthers have shown just in terms of their conversion, like that might be the case. But I mean, Barkov hasn't been playing very well. Reinhart hasn't been playing very well as of late. So I think there's more in the tank in terms of shooting percentage with the Florida Panthers. And we've seen Tkachuk get hot, right? Like remember the second quarter of this season, like all of a sudden he just went blast off time after, slow out the gate again. So we'll see. I think a 90-point pace is probably, maybe that's the ceiling here, just based on this type of deployment that he has. But we'll see. I would treat him as a buy low, and I think his managers are probably a little bit pissed. 78-point pace for Tkachuk. What the hell?
Yeah, I think. I think it's a possibility for sure, knowing what he's done. But I do think at the end of the year, you're probably looking at his point total, and you're like, was this guy worth 11th overall ADP? Probably not.
Yeah, and we'll see. I mean, that I always like to think, especially at this time of year, when we have a bigger sample size, it's like, where's this guy going to be drafted next season? Because I still see Tkachuk as a 90-point player, but he's not going to get drafted at 11, right? Unless he pops the hell off in the last 30 games here. So we might be looking at a value in draft season.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I like that. All right, let's talk about some more busts. Giggity, big ones. We got to talk about Chris Kreider's a player I wanted to bring to the table here. The guy has been tooting in all our faces here this year. Oh man. Well, first off, like I gotta say, I think Chris Kreider is injured this year. Like he's obviously had a back injury that's been lingering this season. I think that's really been affecting him. But I mean, he's on a 34-point pace. I didn't have high hopes for Chris Kreider this year. His ADP was in the 40s on Yahoo, and that made no sense, right? Which we identified in draft season, but still, like, he's on a 34-point pace. This is like, a Huberto level, like collapse, right? He's just playing terribly. It's definitely not your father's Chris Kreider. All right. It's, he's been a lot more efficient earlier on in his career. So anyways,
I wanted to say, you mentioned the point pace, right? Like, that's obviously like on face value really bad. What's even worse is the assists, right? Like that's what really stands out. 2 assists in 41 games. Like this guy's on pace for 4 assists. And I really think that just comes down to, Zibanejad's been terrible. That's his line mate. Riley Smith, they thought maybe he would bring him in. They would bring him in and they would have chemistry. They've had no chemistry. Riley Smith hasn't been good. And also the power play hasn't been good. The Rangers have the 13th worst power play. Utah, Calgary, Nashville, Columbus, Chicago, and Pittsburgh all have a better power play percentage than the Rangers this year. And that just can't happen.
Yeah, that's a big time surprise. Like, with Kreider in particular and the New York Rangers, like this was not something I had on my bingo card. The Rangers being such a fire wagon hockey team, like their offense is still decent. Their expected goals for decent at 5-on-5, but their expected goals against is skyrocketing. Like these guys are hemorrhaging shots, their shots against, they're hemorrhaging chances against. It's insane, right? And Kreider, like he's an offensive player, so he's not really known for his defensive acumen. So I think the Rangers are playing down a lot of times, and his ice time is down. Chris Kreider, his IPP is the lowest mark of his career at all strengths, right? And I dug in a little bit on the microstats. I don't know if you ever look at microstats there, Jared. Corey Schneider, got to shout him out. But like zone entries have just fallen off a cliff. So this is a guy that, he wasn't the main puck carrier or puck possession guy on that line, but he did do that a little bit. Whereas this year, based on Corey's metrics here, he's not doing that at all. So he's basically like a worse version of Alex Ovechkin. You know what I mean? Just skate into the zone, set up, and hopefully like get the puck on your stick, right? He's really not touching the puck at all, and that's evidenced by his low IPP.
Yeah, it's tough to say what's going to happen rest of the year. Obviously, we have a lot of questions. Like, is he going to get traded, right? Like, he's been in trade rumors. Is Mika Zibanejad going to get traded? Mm-hmm. Like, I would expect his power play to improve. Like, I just don't see them having the 13th worst power play in the NHL. So that's going to help Kreider, but I just feel like 5v5 with his line mates and how they're performing, it's tough. But I do expect a little bit of a bounce back from Zibanejad if he does stay on the team. Like his shooting percentage is pretty low. But yeah, obviously disappointing for Kreider. He is older. You mentioned that back injury, so that definitely could be a factor in his poor play.
Absolutely. Have you seen this guy's neck? His neck is insane. Like, like it's like an orange on a toothpick, right? It's just a long, he's like a giraffe. I don't know. Insane jugular vein on this man. That rhymes and that sounds good. But yeah, the power play brutal for New York. And again, another thing I did not see coming this season. Like last year, Kreider had 29 power play points, including 18 goals. He's one of the best in the league in deflections on the power play. And this year, he has 5 power play points, and they're all goals in 41 games. That's nuts. So he's pacing for 10 power play points after 29 last season. Like that says it all, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Why don't you talk to me about some of the players you're looking at who have busted and have just hurt your feelings?
Yeah. Let's look here. Brady Tkachuk. This one is actually like more as of late. Like to start the year, he was fine. Like maybe didn't provide the most value if your league doesn't count hits. That's where that's his bread and butter in terms of peripherals. If you're in a Cats league, etc.
Mm-hmm.
But looking at his point pace, he's on pace for 31 goals, which is okay. But he is on pace for 63 points.
Yep.
Which is not what you want out of Brady Tkachuk, who has the potential to be a 40 goal scorer, a point per game player. And I mean, looking at some of his stats, his 5v5 micro stats, like not micro stats, sorry, advanced stats are pretty low. Like his shooting percentage, 5v5, I think is like 5%.
Yeah.
On ice shooting percentage isn't great. I think he has the lowest IPB of his career. So, those are signals to me that he could just be getting unlucky here. So I would consider him a pretty good buy low, but obviously as of right now, as things stand, like he's been a bust for sure. Like he's been a guy that's like top 15 ADP this season on a lot of platforms. Like he's not doing what he's supposed to be doing.
Yeah, and this is a guy I actually like Brady Tkachuk in points leagues coming into this season. I felt good about that. Like I sort of value him as like a 70 to 75 point player with the insane periffs, right? That's what he's known for. I mean, in a category league, it's not really a bust, right? Because he's still providing those hits, those shots, all that stuff. Pims, if he got that, he's doing that. This guy's an ultimate dingus. But I didn't expect him to kind of perform so poorly. And yeah, the shooting percentage, especially at even strength, that's the painful part, right? On the power play, he's doing okay, right? And that's sort of keeping his season-long shooting percentage at a reasonable level. Like he's not an efficient player, but at 5-on-5, that's really where it's fallen off. Like you highlighted there, like he's shooting like 5% or something. So I do think there's a bit of regression coming that way, but we have to temper expectations. Like this guy, he's amazing at the stats we look at here, Jared. Like, let me dig in on Brady Tkachuk here. Yeah, on the season, he's first overall in shots on goal per 60. He does that. All right. Fourth overall in individual Corsi for. So he's chucking them with the best. Second overall in individual scoring chances. But, usually high scoring chances like that should equal a high shooting percentage. And with this player, it just doesn't. And it really never has. And that's an interesting piece to me because why? And something that I've extrapolated here after listening to guys like Jack Hahn is a guy that I'm really interested in. He does a book called Hockey Tactics, and something I've said this before with Brady Tkachuk, he's in too tight, right? So you remember that one game? I don't know if you remember this, but Luke Shen got like 6 shots right. He was right in front of the net, and it was just a rerun. He was just like bang, 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 bang. He did 6 shots, and like that skews the statistics, right? So the next day you look and you're like, wow, Luke Shen had like 6 high danger scoring chances for. It's like, yeah, but they were all like just, knuckle pucks about 1 foot in where the goalie's totally squared up and there's no chance for him to score, right? And I feel like Brady Tkachuk does that a little bit. Like some of his numbers, like they look great, but he's in so tight that there's really nowhere for him to go. And these NHL goalies are so good. I really feel like that is a lot of these scoring chances that he does get and the shots he does get. So something that I'd like to see Brady Tkachuk do is create a little more space for himself, right? But I mean, he's, a few years into his career now. I'm not sure that that's really in the cards for him. That said, we're talking fantasy here. This guy is a stud in real life, and he's obviously a very valuable player for the Senators. But I don't know, where do you see him moving forward? Like I do, what is he pacing for right now? I had it up, but I don't have it right now. Something like 60 points or something like that.
Yeah, 63 point pace. I think with some of the advanced stats that I mentioned, like 5v5, like the shooting percentage, honest shooting percentage, his IPP, like I'm expecting to bounce back. Like I would consider him a buy low. I would definitely trade for him. He might not pay off at his ADP in the long run, but yeah, I would expect maybe point per game pace, roughly, maybe a little bit under that for the rest of the year.
Damn, that would be nice. I mean, I didn't get him anywhere. I was interested for sure. He was just always drafted a little bit higher than I was comfortable picking him up, right? And then in my cats leagues, he was definitely gone. But yeah, I think I like Kachuk for 70. If like a 70-point pace moving forward. One thing that's really nice about Brady Kachuk is his power play performance. That's always going to be good. That Senators power play, they get a ton of power play time on ice. That's something I've noticed over the last couple seasons. The Senators usually lead the league in actual power play time on ice. So I don't know, maybe it's Brady Kachuk just running around being a total lunatic and people are taking penalties and stuff, but there's lots of minutes for everybody to eat on the power play. So I feel good about Brady there, but yeah, we'll see what happens 5-on-5 there. All right, let's move on. I want to talk about one more bust here, and maybe if you got anybody else. I got to talk about Elias Pettersson, and this is killing me, man. This guy, like, it. First off, like, did you saw today what Jim Rutherford came out and talked about JT Miller and Pettersson just airing the team's dirty laundry, which we all know exists. But I mean, what did you think about that report? If you read it, I don't want to put you on the spot.
I didn't read the whole thing. I just saw a headline that said it's an issue. Like Rutherford was just saying it was an issue, and it's so interesting because I hadn't heard about this until like a month ago. Like, I don't know if like you're a Canucks fan, maybe you've heard about it. But I did see an interview of Elias Pettersson talking on a beach saying like, yeah, he's hot-headed. And I guess this stuff has been going on for quite a bit now. But what did Rutherford say specifically?
Well, he basically just got into it a little bit more, said that, both parties have been working on it, and he thought that there was a way through this conflict, but now he thinks there's no good way to get out of it. And he just said that, right? It's just like, and the Canucks have just won 2 straight. So it's like, buddy, I mean, shut up, shut the hell up. But anyways, obviously where there's smoke, there's fire. There's clearly something going on with Pettersson and JT Miller there in Vancouver. And, Rutherford also said that it's impacting the entire team, right? Which is just, it's insane. I feel like it's got to be more than just 2 players that don't like each other. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, obviously we don't have the specifics of what has went on between those two, but it's clearly an issue if the GM is speaking about this. Yeah, I don't know. Obviously we have Miller like missing time as well, a personal leave.
Yeah. What was that about?
No clue. I mean, I think we're told not to speculate in case if it was anything that was serious, but it's hard not to believe that there's some sort of relation between this problem. So I don't know. I think at this point, one of them has to get traded. Like, there's just no way that they're going to stay on the same team, I would imagine. But the question is who gets traded, right? And how that is going to impact their fantasy values. With Pettersson, right? He's going to yield more for the team, but like, how old is he? 25, 26. He's a young player. Like, you probably want to be keeping him over Miller, but yeah, it's hard to say, man.
Yeah, I think from what I've heard, like, they've been getting lowball offers for Miller. So it's been like kind of a non-starter, whereas like Pettersson has value. So they can actually recoup some of the player that they're sending off there by trading Elias Pettersson. But yeah, it doesn't make sense. I don't see how we win either way with either of these players gone, but what the hell? Anyways, this is terrible stuff. Very triggering. But in terms of Pettersson, I think, we definitely can say that this has been affecting him, and maybe as far back as last season after he signed his contract, right? Like, this guy hasn't been good for a hot minute. It's been, almost like a full season of him kind of performing at like a 50-point level. And right now, this season, he's performing at a 59-point pace. And it's hard to watch. This guy's making $11 million. So, I mean, digging in on the player, shots are down, right? Shooting percentage is down, and IPP is still fine, but he just looks soft out there. It's not like not engaged, and and then the power play performance, like, he's only pacing for 20 power play points, basically, where he got 31 power play points last year. So I think this is a guy that's not being prioritized on the power play anymore either. So that concerns me for sure. If they keep this team together. And where are you at with Pettersson?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the shots. Like, he's on pace for 162 shots. Like, that is brutal. But I mean, there are a couple of things that you could look at, maybe like some bad luck. Like, shooting percentage is the lowest of his career right now. IPP is the second lowest ever. I think just based off. Oh, also one thing as well is like, people have talked about tendonitis. I think that he was dealing with.
Yeah,
was it tendonitis?
His knee or something. Yeah, he had something with his knee that was just ongoing.
Like, people have looked at like his speed bursts, and they've seen that it's much lower than it was 2 years ago. So that's one factor to look at as well, along with this Miller drama. But I think we're starting to look at, 22, 23 being an outlier year. Like if you look at his IPP in that season, it was insanely high. Like a lot of the metrics for the Canucks in the last 2 years, not this season, like it was screaming regression, right? Like very high on his shooting percentage, very high shooting percentage. So I was expecting some regression from him. But I wasn't expecting this. So yeah, there's just a lot of like unknown factors, right? The Miller drama, the tendonitis potentially. So it's hard to say if I would want to buy low on him. But I mentioned some of the stuff like shooting percentage being low, IPP being low. So it's hard to say. And also Besser being potentially traded. Like what happens if Miller and Besser get traded? Like who's going to be, is his power play going to be even remotely good? Is there, even strength, is it going to be good? So it's kind of hard to say, or hard to project where Pettersson's going to be at the end of the year.
I think too, like bringing in Jake DeBrusk was, that was supposed to be Pettersson's guy, right? And it hasn't really materialized. DeBrusk has had good spurts here in Vancouver, but yeah, it's not the answer. And Pettersson, that was really the problem last year. I think that's pretty well documented. He had no one to play with. So like, and this year it's really kind of going the same way. And he's not the focal piece on this team. Whereas I think when you pay a guy $11 million, you got to make him the focal piece on your team. And to me, it's still JT Miller and obviously Quinn Hughes. But JT Miller is sort of getting that 1A treatment. He's that 1C, whereas Pettersson's sort of being minimized a little bit. So I don't know. I'm with you there. I don't think he's a buy low. I'm not too interested right now until I see what happens. I think, what do you think if JT Miller gets traded, do you think that Pettersson's value goes up?
It's just so hard to say without knowing how big this locker room issue is. Do they play even strength together at all?
When in a pinch, right? They'll play what they call the lotto line: 649, Besser, Pettersson, and Miller. But I mean, it's few and far between these days.
Yeah, it honestly is just so hard to say, like trying to weigh the impact of that locker room issue. So yeah, I couldn't honestly tell you, to be honest, man. Like it is just something that we're going to have to wait and see. And hopefully some of those metrics look better, like him shooting the puck more. But it is kind of a disaster in Vancouver at the moment.
It absolutely is, buddy. It stinks. Oh God. Can't they just be friends? I mean, I've played with absolute idiots, but when you win together, it's like it all goes away. I'm surprised.
Yeah.
Like that makes me think that it's something more than just like, I don't like this guy. He's a jerk. Like what happened? I don't know.
We'll know one day. There's going to be a book written by Rick Tocchet in like 10 years, or maybe not Rick Tocchet. Somebody, maybe Kiefer Sherwood writes a book, best-selling novel, and we'll get to know the information.
Well, that sounds good to me. He should do that now. He's probably one of my favorites on the team. Him and Connor Garland. Like I'll just run with those guys. Two guys that have no business, being as good as they are this year. We're relying on Kiefer Sherwood and Connor Garland to keep our team afloat over here in Vancouver.
Yeah,
showing good. Okay.
That's not great.
No, that's a bad state of affairs. All right, let's move on. Before we get done with the bust here, anybody else you want to highlight, Jared?
In terms of the busts here,
busted up.
Just look. Well, we only have so much time. We could go through this a little bit rapid fire.
Let's rapid fire. Let's do it.
So Kevin Fiala, 51-point pace, despite averaging the highest ice time of his career. And this is just, I think, primarily due to Philip Deneau and Trevor Moore being terrible. Like that's been the main line. Deneau, it's been Fiala, Deneau, Laferriere, and then Fiala, Deneau, Moore. Deneau has 4 goals in 46 games. Moore has 6 goals in 38 games. And we kind of see this with Fiala's on-ice shooting percentage. It's low, right? Like his goal scoring's been fine. Like his finishing's been fine. But like if his line mates are not finishing, like what are you going to do? I still like him as a buy low because of his ice time. And sometimes they've been running like Fiala, Kempe, Kopitar on some nights. I would love them to run Fiala and Kempe on a line, but I don't know why they don't do that. So that's one. I can continue with other players unless you want. Do you have any opinion on
do
Fiala?
that. Actually, you know what? My notes on Fiala are exactly what you just said. Like great player under the hood, line mates problem, right? So that said too, I think his line mates, I like Alex Laferriere. I'm actually a fan of that player, the underlying metrics there. So I think I'd rather see him with Fiala. If they're going to keep Fiala on that line, I'd like to see Laferriere as opposed to Trevor Moore. At least right now, Trevor Moore has been a good chucker and shooter in the past. But we'll see. He's still coming off injury and kind of getting his legs there. So yeah, Fiala, I am interested in Fiala. It's the second half. This is his time to shine.
I know. I don't think that's a thing anymore.
No, probably not. Yeah,
probably not. I wish, man. But I do think that with this on-ice shooting percentage, if we do see like that shooting percentage regress to the mean, like it's going to help Fiala. Like, I think he's going to have a better second half. I mean, the ice time has been great. Like, that was kind of a concern with Fiala on the Kings, like 17 minutes ish, but I think it's like 18 minutes and 30 seconds or something like that per game. So that's good. Another guy I wanted to mention here is Zach Hyman, who I still think is a great buy low, but he is on pace for 52 points, which is not good.
Rough stuff.
I think regression was to be expected. Like, we all knew regression was going to come here. Shooting percentage was very high last year. But I do expect some bounce back. I mean, he has the lowest IPP right now of his entire career.
Yep.
I think a big problem with Hyman right now has been the power play production, 10 power play points in 45 games, the lowest since 2020. This could have just been a regression as well, because like the Oilers power play has been pretty insane in the last 2 or 3 years. Last year was kind of a down year, but maybe this is just back to normal for Hyman and the Oilers. And the on-ice shooting percentage was also insane for the Oilers in the last 2 seasons. So I don't know, maybe Hyman's not like a 75-point player anymore, but I still think he's like a 65 to 70-point player. Line one with Draisaitl and McDavid on one of the best power plays in the NHL. Still buy low, in my opinion, and hopefully he can turn it around.
Yeah, I like that. Hyman is an interesting one because I actually traded him this year in my Cacuffle team, the Keeping Karlsson League. And of course, he popped off immediately after I did that. But it's funny, I traded him basically for Carter Verhaeghe. So,
Right.
And I see those players as kind of similar. So maybe put you on the spot here. Who would you rather have rest of the season, Hyman or Carter Verhaeghe?
Oh, Hyman easily. I mean,
baby,
Hyman is line one with Draisaitl, McDavid. He's power play one. Like, that's going to stay the same, right? Like, Hyman's not been taken off power play one ever. Whereas like Verhaeghe, he's been moved to line three. He's been there for like a month now, hasn't changed. And, sometimes they put Samoskevich on power play one over Verhaeghe, which doesn't necessarily instill confidence in me. So yeah, Hyman, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a good piece. Like, one thing I did want to mention on Hyman really quick, it's something that I noticed in the offseason that's continued on here, is his role on that power play. It's like, obviously he's that net front guy, but he's not getting those puck touches, right? So he's very reliant on the other guys to sort of, like, you remember how he got his 50 goals. He just stick on the ice and they're bouncing the puck off his stick in front of the net. Well, that's kind of gone away here. And his IPP on the power play is really low. Like, it's just an interesting piece, but now this year his shots and his shooting percentage is down on the power play as well. So we'll see. I think I agree with you. I'd rather take Hyman there based solely on the deployment, but I do still think it's not like a slam dunk. I think they're comparable. And I think Verhaeghe is a 70-point pace moving forward. I think Hyman is probably a 70-point pace moving forward as well. So you would have to give it to Hyman because of the PP1 and the even strength deployment though.
Yeah, I mean, I would love for Verhaeghe to turn it around. I think both of them are going to turn it around. But in terms of some other busts here, Miro Heiskanen, like who would have thought Heiskanen could disappoint even more than last year? Like, he's a bust 2 years in a row somehow. Some defensemen that have more points than Heiskanen include Matt Grzelcyk, Owen Power, Travis Sanheim, and Colton Parayko, which is really cool. He has 7 power play points in 49 games, so he's on pace for 11 power play points. I mean, I do expect some bounce back. Like I talked about in my last buy low video, being like a bounce back player because he has the lowest IPP of his career, 0 goals in the power play, extremely low on ice shooting percentage on the power play. So yeah, not a, maybe, Heiskanen is more of a better in real life player than fantasy, but I don't think he's going to end up with like 40 points. Like, I think he's more of like a 55-point player at this point. Yeah. What are your thoughts on Heiskanen?
Yeah, I mean, he's certainly getting the opportunity to get out of this funk, right? They're trotting him out there in all situations. I've seen power plays where they leave him out for the full 2 minutes, and Thomas Harley's like having a Coke and a smile on the bench, right? Yep. But I think he reminds me a little bit of Mo Seider, like a guy, like obviously he doesn't have the periffs like Mo Seider does, but he's getting the toughest matchups on the other team, right? He's out there playing hard minutes, and I think with Thomas Harley as his defense partner, he's kind of defaulting to the defensive defenseman, whereas Thomas Harley is the guy rushing the puck. Thomas Harley is a great puck rusher. So is Miro Heiskanen. But I think they have to sort of balance that relationship when they're out there together. And I really feel like they've got Heiskanen sort of as the, break the puck out of the zone and then just be defensively responsible, right? Where they're giving Harley maybe a little bit more run there. But it's pretty rough. I'm surprised, even on the power play, like they've sort of Heiskanen is not getting involved in the play, right? He's facilitating kind of the down low play, but it's not shots to the point. There's not like his one-timers are down this year. It's just, yeah, I think the 50 point pace he got last year, I'd be happy with that. Or 50, he's on a 62 point pace, sorry, but like 54 points this year from Miro Heiskanen, I think we'd be happy with that because he's pacing for 40 right now, but he's got to get cooking on the power play. And I think Dallas power play has been so stinky this year, hasn't it?
It has, yeah. I mean, the silver lining is really just him averaging the highest power play time of his career. Like, you got to expect the power play points to come. But yeah, hopefully this power play can turn it around, because I do think you have some players like Wyatt Johnson who like super snake bitten, right, in terms of
Yep.
goals. So yeah, I mean, in terms of some other players here that I wanted to mention just quickly, Alex Tuck is not necessarily a bust, but him not being power play one is super frustrating.
Yep.
He's actually having a great year if he was on power play one. Like, he's on a 58 point pace, 26 goals. If he was on PP1, he would be like a 70 point player.
Yep.
The problem is Jason Zucker has 9 power play goals. Like, how are you going to take this guy off, right? So that's been frustrating. I don't know if you have any thoughts on Tuck.
No, carry on. Who else you got?
Well, I got to talk about my boy who I've been fighting in the trenches for on Twitter/X, Timo Meier. Okay.
Right.
Is he a bust?
Not his
really.
fault. Yeah.
I mean, if your league doesn't count hits, it's pretty frustrating.
Yep.
In the cat league, he's still fine. Like, he has the shots, he has the hits. His 5v5 production's been good, right? He is third in 5v5 points, 4 ahead of Nico Hischier, only 4 behind Jack Hughes. So he's been great 5v5. It's pretty annoying for people I hear people talking smack about Timo, like, oh, we're paying $9 million for this guy. It's like, well, maybe he should be on power play one, right? Yep. Like, we saw that last night. Like, last night was like the perfect, I felt so vindicated because they run out a 4-minute power play and it's trash. And then, Timo gets on later. Like, they put Palat on power play one over Timo Meier. Like, it just makes my blood boil. And then at the end of the game, finally, like, he's in the right side of the ice. He should be a right wing, in my opinion, not a left wing player. He was a right wing on the Sharks. He has that booming one-timer, great on the right side. And he hits a one-timer goal, and it's just so frustrating. Like, I understand Bratt. That's Brad's side, but like, if Hischier's out, like, move Brad to the bumper or move Meier to the bumper. Like, you can't tell me that Palat's going to be a better option on power play one over Meier. Like, it's just incredibly frustrating.
Yeah, I feel like Sheldon Keefe is like galaxy braining it a little bit too much. You know what I mean? Like, just do what makes sense. Even like getting Nason out there. Nason's a guy that I've been in on this year, like as a valuable player, like a 50 to 55 point player because of his production there. But it's weird that they've kind of rolled him out instead of Meier, right? And obviously it's something to do with the makeup of that power play, and that kind of makes sense. But when you got guys out of the lineup on power play one, what is the reasoning for not having Timo Meier get up on power play one? Like, I still can't fathom it. I feel like they got to find some way to make that work.
Yeah, I think Nason's been really good on the power play. Like, I think the justification of it was that Nason is a right-handed player, and he has that one-time threat that Meier doesn't have, because it's like Hughes, Hischier, and Brad are all left-handers. So I kind of understand the dilemma that they're in. Like, but it's like, why sign this guy to $9 million a year to not, utilize one of his best, values in being a power play goal scorer? Like, I forget what it was, but I think he's like 13th or 17th in power play goals in the NHL in the last 4 years. Like, he's an elite power play goal scorer. And I mean, if he was on power play one, he would be like a 70 to 75 point player this year, or like 70 point player, like 30 plus goals.
Yep.
And you'd be really happy about it. But yeah, it is what it is. Now, like, in terms of, there's a couple of, I just want to fire off some bust stats for you. And then maybe we can just talk about some steals and then finish it off, because we still have a couple of steals to talk about here. Igor Shesterkin's having the worst season of his career, goals against average and save percentage wise. UC Saros has had the worst goals against average and save percentage since his rookie year. Thatcher Demko, worst stats ever. Jeremy Swayman, worst stats ever. So this is a terrible year for goalies, but this can coincide with the lack of shots that we're seeing across the league, which is going to tank save percentage and goals against. Couple of things here. Bedard's on pace for 21 goals. That's pretty trash. I mean, I think that's a big lesson that I learned this year, is that it takes these younger players time to develop. Like, guys like McKinnon, Jack Hughes, they didn't start off that great, but for a guy that's supposed to have this generational shot, which I think he does, it's just tough being on pace for 21 goals. Wyatt Johnson's on pace for 18 goals, but he's been good lately. Like, I'm a big fan of Wyatt Johnston.
Once they moved him up to that top line there, like him and J-Rob and Dadonov they've been cooking.
Yeah, they've been cooking. And even that line, Ben, Duchesne, and Johnson was cooking for a bit. We just need we need to see the power play improve. And I do think, I think Jay Fresh tweeted it out, like lowest goals above expected. Like Wyatt Johnson was like second on that list, like -8,
Yeah.
or something like that. So like his shooting percentage is pretty low. I'm still a fan of Wyatt Johnson for the rest of the year, but just to fire off a little more stats here, Matthews has been pretty disappointing considering his ADP. Like he's on pace for 89 points, not the best. Svechnikov is on pace for 55 points, the worst since his rookie year. Stamkos is on pace for 56 points, which is the worst since his rookie season as well. But I know, like myself and you included, like we weren't fans of Steven Stamkos going into the year, right? Like he's been a power play merchant. This was sort of expected. Now some more stats here. Trocheck is on pace for 53 points. That's trash. Buchnevich is on pace for 51 points. Like this is the worst since the 2018-2019 season. What are your thoughts on Buchnevich?
It's, you know what? It's never been a guy that I've been super interested in just because he's a guy that's based off of efficiency, right? And in terms of fantasy, like for him to really pop off, he's got to have a high shooting percentage. He's got to have a high on-ice shooting percentage. And yeah, when those things sort of fall away, now we're left with a guy he's not getting crazy ice time. And now he's all of a sudden not converting, right? So I think he has a bit more in the tank there. Like what did you say he's pacing for?
51 points.
Yeah, I mean, I like Buchnevich as kind of a 60-point player, but Dylan Holloway sort of emerging a little bit. I think that kind of takes a little steam away from Pavel Buchnevich, right? We got a guy that they can prioritize a little bit more, who's getting the biz at least at even strength. So, Buchnevich, never a guy I'm super excited about, but he's definitely should be better than what he's shown so far.
Yeah, like this is the worst point pace since the 2018 season, so it's tough. I think a big problem too is the Blues are splitting their power plays 1A, 1B. Like that's going to hurt players like Buchnevich.
Yep.
Another guy here, Rupe Hintz, on pace for 52 points, the worst since his sophomore season.
Yep, down on line 3 now. Oh,
down on line 3. It's terrible. I actually think they moved him back to power play 1. I don't know if they played last night or whatever, but I think they moved him back to power play 1. Could be wrong on that. But either way, that is terrible, right? Like the peripherals aren't there. The deployment's not great. Like that's embarrassing. Mika Zibanejad is on pace for 15 goals and 48 points. What the hell is going on with him?
We got to put a trigger warning ahead of this episode because fantasy managers are like, oh my dear God. I mean, to me, like obviously we talked about a couple guys on New York already, but I did not see the Rangers falling back this hard. And the power play, like that's one thing that's floated them, like no problem. And that's been a real weakness of their team this season. And like you said, Shesterkin as well, like his numbers are in the toilet. So I just think the vibe there in New York is terrible, right? I mean, it's better than it was. It's not as bad as it is in Vancouver, but it might be second worst in the league. I don't know.
It's second worst. Yeah. They get the second prize for that. But, I mean, just a couple of more players here. Like Slafkovsky hasn't really taken the jump that some people expected him to take, but this is another lesson learned for me. Like, he's 20 years old. Like it's going to take time. He's on pace for 49 points, which is worse than last year. Lexi Lafreniere is on pace for 50 points. I wasn't too high on him just because I didn't think power play 1 was an option, but maybe if, Zibanejad or Kreider get let go, that can happen. Dylan Cousins on pace for 40 points and 16 goals. I thought maybe he would be back on power play 1 this year, ripping the
Buffalo's
puck.
been rough. Buffalo's been rough.
Yeah, I liked Buffalo. I tweeted out that they were going to make it to the playoffs. And I left that tweet up because I'm a man of honesty and honor. And they suck. So it's just Buffalo Bills, Buffalo Sabres. The Sabres are in a much worse position. And then one last player here, Leo Carlson. Actually, wait, there's a couple of more. Sorry. Leo Carlson on pace for 30 points. That's really bad. The Greg, what does Nate say? The Greg Cronin hellscape?
The Greg Cronin hellscape. Sure. That's alive and well.
Yeah, and I'll just fire off some defensemen here. I know we only have so much time here. Bouchard's on pace for 60 points. That's fine. Like he's still top 6, top 7 in points, but like that's not what you wanted from Bouchard. The power play points are down. Noah Dobson, who is now out long term, I think he's only out like 4 to 6 weeks. I don't know if we have an exact timeline. He's on pace for 42 points. I didn't really like Dobson too much this year. I don't know if I drafted him. I think I drafted him 2% of my drafts just because his ADP was so high. But that's really bad for what he did compared to what he did last year.
To me, it's the coaching there. Like Patrick Waugh, even at the end of last year, he was minimizing Dobson a little bit. He was putting Mike Riley out on the power play. And maybe Dobson was battling an injury, but that wasn't a good sign to me going into the season. So I definitely had some muted expectations for Dobson as well.
Yeah, even like earlier on in the year, they were putting Chalowski on the power play
Yeah,
one
what
over
are you doing?
Dobson, and then they were splitting the units, and finally they just went back to like a normal power play one of Lee, Nelson,
Mhm.
Barzell, Horvat, and it started doing better. And it's like, why did you do this thing? Like, you have like talent up there that can be the number one unit. So but yeah, I mean, in terms of some other players, Eric Carlson's on pace for 50 points, not even really power play one. Like, what the hell is going on
I
with
don't know.
him? That's just, I mean, the Sharks season was an outlier, but I thought, hey, maybe like new assistant coach coming in who's going to run the power play, who worked with Carlson on the Sharks. I forgot his name.
I
I thought that
can't
would be
remember.
better. Yeah.
You know what's interesting though, I didn't exactly realize this until the other day when I was talking with Nate about Carlson, but the power play in Pittsburgh is like 7th overall.
It is. Yeah. It's
So, but
great.
Eric Carlson is not doing well. So, I
No.
mean, damn, you talked about Matt Grzelcyk. Like, is that the key to unlocking the Pittsburgh power play? Matt Grzelcyk? What the hell are we doing here? Oh my god!
Yeah, like I said, he like Grzelcyk has like more points than Heiskanen, which is really funny. Brock Faber on pace for 37 points. I've never really liked Faber. I just think that he had a great rookie year, but he was relied on so heavily. Like the reason why those points came, in my opinion, is just because they had all those injuries, which they seem to happen. They seem to have again this year. Like the Wild are really
Yep.
snake bitten when it comes to injuries. But Faber didn't come into the league being this like offensive prospect, and he just hasn't been able to hold on to power play one because they need to rely on him for penalty kill and tough matchups. So
Yep.
yeah, that's been bad. Mike Matheson on pace for 38 points, lost power play one to Lane Hudson, which is something I actually didn't expect. I wasn't
No.
sure what would happen there. I thought maybe Hudson, they would kind of shelter him a bit, run power play two, maybe trade Mike Matheson later on in the year or in the offseason. But yeah, Hudson immediately took over, and this guy's crazy. Been crazy good. And just four more players here. Morgan Riley on pace for 36 points. That is bad. The
Yeah,
worst
they
since
they
the
just
20.
they have an aversion to putting him on the power play, which is just I think that says it all. Like he can't even get on the power play. They're running a 5 forward set at times. It's just that's showing no good.
Yeah, and I don't blame them for taking him off the power play. Like, he hasn't been good. He hasn't shown the willingness to shoot the puck. But yeah, putting Max Domi on power play one over Riley is certainly a bold choice. Noah Hannafin has been terrible. This was sort of expected, though. I like Noah Hannafin going into the year, and I apologize for all of my fans and viewers who drafted Hannafin because of me. I was very convinced that they couldn't afford Theodore, but I think that Robin Leonard contract restructuring helped them sign him to a long-term contract. They put Hannafin on power play one as soon as he got traded last year. He was power play one in the
Yep.
playoffs, and he was power play one all throughout training camp until the last week where they're like, no, Theodore's on
Yep.
power play one. It's over. So at that point, I knew it was over, but I still at that point had drafted a lot of Hannafin in best ball, which has certainly cost me. Um, and two more players, Charlie McAvoy on pace for 36 points. I think it's
Gross.
over for McAvoy. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think once he gets healthy, we'll see, right? Like, and he has a new kid. I think he just had a baby, or his wife had a baby. So
Yeah.
sometimes that's a little boost there. But Mason Lowry on the power play, like, I'm not convinced. I think McAvoy will get that again, but it doesn't mean that he's gonna pop off, right? Like, this could just be a down year for the guy.
Yeah, I just worry that, McAvoy's not been the best offensive power play producer, and Lowry is sort of an emerging threat to that position. I do worry about what's going to happen this year and next, because he
Yep,
is
yep.
relied on in tough matchups and penalty kill and stuff like that. And lastly is Justin Falk, who is on pace for 33 points. I was very high on Falk going into the year. Apparently, he was very banged up last year. Maybe that's just a little bit of a narrative that I was running with, but a lot of his stats were like his shooting percentage was super low. And this year it was like, okay, like he could be just power play one. They're going to run a heavy usage for power play one. He has the peripherals. I thought he was great value, right? Like that was
Yep.
the biggest thing for me. His ADP was super late, but turns out there was no value there and he's just been trash.
I mean, there's still value, and that's a good swing. That's the type of swing that we need to be taking in fantasy, right? Like
Yeah.
the guy was available way late. We knew he was earmarked for power play one. He's a guy that has a great peripheral floor, right? Good shots too.
Yep.
I like that swing, and honestly, you're getting him at such value that it doesn't matter if he doesn't hit. You're just like, whatever, get the hell off my team. He's probably going to have little pockets of value here throughout the season, but they obviously the St. Louis Blues signing Broberg and then Cam Fowler trade. Like,
Yep.
yeah, they have options now. Whereas I think at the beginning of the year, they had no options, but it's Scott Perunovich or it's Justin Falk, right? And Perunovich, that's showing no good either, right? And
Well,
he
he's
gets
gone now.
bounced over. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Islanders just stacking up. They got Tony D and
ODD. Yeah.
Scotty P. So that's terrible. That's the state of affairs there in Long Island. I don't know. I love Matt Barzal though. He's one of my favorites, and I hate that he's on that team because they just can't convert. They're actually doing. We're talking about the Islanders, but the Corsi 4 percentage pretty damn good. They just can't convert. They stink.
He looks good out there. He looks good.
Really a very good coach in my opinion. Certainly not this year, but that's that, buddy. This is becoming the bust episode, and you know what? I'm here for it because this is like it feels like a vent session, and I never get to do that. Right.
Yes.
I'm always just like talking about, what I think is going to happen, but I'm never like, what the hell is this crap? Right. And there's a lot of players here. Like we're going to be able to dive in at the end of the year and really look at what happened here. But yeah, all these guys you brought to the table, absolutely tooting in our faces. And, we're not here for that. So you know what, as a palate cleanser, buddy, we got to talk. And I guess we'll cut this part a little bit short, but I want to talk about some steals or surprises here that have happened this year. And do you have one locked and loaded or do you want me to do one?
We can start off with a guy that we were both, I would say, pretty high on going into the year, Marty Necas. And that's sort of a hot topic as well with the recent trade. So yeah, let's start off with him and then I can go to one of my guys.
You bet, buddy. I mean, it's not rocket science with Necas. Like, I was talking to you a little bit earlier about Corey Schneider's all three zones, the micro stats and things like how a player generates offense. And to me, like shot assists and chance assists, those are things that I'm looking at under the hood, and also zone entries that lead to scoring chances. And in the offseason, Marty Necas showed out in all of those, even though he played, he didn't have a very good season in Carolina in 23-24. He had 53 points in 77 games. He had a good season under the hood, but his deployment took a hit. He was playing 17 minutes, 21 seconds, average time on ice. Power play performance, I mean, he had 13 power play points, which is terrible. That's half of what he had the season before. Well, fast forward to this year, like I knew, or I had a really good feeling once you get Gensel out of there, Gensel got traded, right? They had no choice but to put Marty Necas on the top power play, right? Rod Brind'Amour, buddy, he really had no choice, right? So I thought for sure,
forced.
I projected Marty Necas for 69 points, and I felt really good about that after a 53-point year. Well, this man is gone nuclear. He's just going bananas. He's on a 93-point pace, which I didn't expect. I can't say I did, but now, like the big thing, actually, before I get into that, on Carolina, his 5-on-5 deployment and metrics, nothing crazy, right? But it was the power play there in Carolina that was really bolstering his numbers. And now he's on a better power play, and he's playing with McKinnon. I mean, damn, like this guy's on a 93-point pace now. I could maybe see an 85 to 90-point pace moving forward. I mean, where are you at with Marty Necas?
I'm a big fan, man. Like similar to you, like I wasn't looking at the micro stats, but it was just obvious to me that this is a player of elite skill. Like just watching, he passes the eye test, right? He's super fast, super skilled player. And also he's in that sort of age range where you start to see players break out. Like he's 26 years old.
Yep.
And it just the thesis on him for last year going into this year was like, he wasn't on power play one, right? Like he's going to be on power play one, and the Canes looked way more thin up front, like, offensively, because they lost a lot of guys. I was like, okay, they're going to be forced to play Necas more minutes. So I just thought he was good value, a guy that loves to shoot the puck and has that breakout potential. But, one thing is interesting is like, he was definitely a major sell high. Like, I think I included him in every single sell high video. I was telling people to sell high. You were tweeting at me, never sell high, but you were right. I mean, you have a fortune ball. You could see the Colorado trade coming.
Oh, exactly. It just called it. Yeah, absolutely called that.
But you made a good call there. I don't know if you were joking, but for me, it still made sense. I apologize, guys, if you sold, high on Necas. But there were some people that said, hey, I sold Necas for Pasternak. Like, you told me to sell high. Like, thanks. And I think that's still
that's
a really good move.
Value. Yeah.
And you could have got creative with selling Necas, but I think the big thing was obviously the lack of 5v5 production from him. Super high shooting percentage, on ice shooting percentage. The power play production was not sustainable, and we saw that with Ghost, right? Like Ghost is falling off a cliff because that power play production was just not sustainable. Now, rest of year, and I saw this Roto analyst, I think, tweeted this out about Rantanen versus Necas, is that Rantanen scored 26 points at 5v5 this year in 813 minutes, and then Necas scored 25 points at 5v5 in 637 minutes this year. So, like you said, he's going from Kotkaniemi as a center to Nathan McKinnon. Like this is massive for his value. Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan. If you have Necas on your team still, I have Necas in like 50% of my leagues right now, which is one of them because I'm in two. And I'm very happy about Natchez. And I was drafting him a good amount too in best ball, even though it was an 8-team league, like as a last round flyer type pick. And I'm happy about those teams because I think they're going to see a bump now. Like you said, I think 85 to 90 point pace is possible playing line one. And also 25 minutes his first game.
Yeah, the deployment. What the hell? I mean,
you
that's
don't see that with Rod the Bod Brindamore. You don't
He
see
doesn't do
that. You know, you're going to see like a 3-minute ice time bump for Natchez, and he was already on pace for like 90 points. So yeah, I'm super excited and I can't wait to see what he does.
I'm absolutely stoked, buddy. I have 10 teams and I got Natchez on 7.
I love that.
7, but yeah, I love the sell.
Wait, hold on. 10 teams? You're on 10 redraft teams?
I joined another one. Yeah, I mean,
you're a sicko, man. How do you do that?
2 of them are dynasty, and then like 3 of them are keepers. So yeah, I mean, it's all over the place. But yeah, 10. I just joined another one. Like, yeah, is a category league.
Even 2 is too much for me. Like, and like I told you earlier before we were rolling, like I think best ball, I'm way more interested in best ball these days because it's just, there's no roster management. Like you just draft the teams and see how they do. And there's obviously like real like money on the line, like a lot of money. But redrafts is a lot of work. Like I was in two or 3 football leagues at the same time early on. It's just hard to manage, but I respect the commitment to 10 teams. That is absolutely insane.
Plus 2 basketball teams. So there you go. I don't know. Fantasy basketball. Actually, that's what got me into fantasy is fantasy basketball more than fantasy hockey. But,
okay, interesting.
Or podcasting anyway. Like I was looking to do something with fantasy basketball, but then, yeah, then this kind of fell in my lap and I liked it a lot more. But anyways, yeah. I love me some Natchez. I love the sell high call. I think that's the right call back to Natchez here. But yeah, it's like if you can get Pasternak for Natchez, that's a no brainer. That's insane. And I think Natchez was a sell high on Carolina. But if you didn't sell high, you weren't able to, now you're loving life, right? And I wasn't looking to sell Natchez because to me, it was like season-long value. He was already going to, like I got him at pick 120 in most spots, right? Like from 100 to 120. That's where I was getting Natchez. He's already blasted past that. So like, to me, there's no reason to get off him. And I kind of I'm in good spots in my league. So it's like, there's no reason to try and maximize value on Natchez. I was just going to enjoy the production, but now he's playing with Mac. Oh my God. I got McKinnon and Natchez on one team. And I'm excited about that team, man, especially because I was able to watch the 2 games that Natchez has played already. And it's stupid. Nathan McKinnon he's the most exciting player, I think, in the league right now. He can turn something out of nothing. Like it's crazy. He looks like he's about to lose the puck. And then all of a sudden he's in complete open ice with full control of the puck, passing it off. Like, just an amazing player. Probably my favorite player to watch this year. But yeah, I don't know.
He's looked good. He's looked good.
Oh, he looks amazing, buddy. So yeah, I'm excited about that. Shout out to Marty Natchez. So we talked about Natchez. I want to talk really quick about Mark Scheifele. This is a player that I think is comparable to Natchez, only like if Natchez didn't get traded to Colorado, I would think Scheifele probably has the higher ceiling moving forward in terms of what he's been doing this year. This guy's pacing for 90 points. He's got 56 and 51 games, but I mean, the Jets this year have been a wagon. There's no question. Like Gabe Vilardi is a guy that you've been talking about, right? The guy you're interested in, Mark Scheifele. And one of the things that, or one of the main things I think the reason the Jets are so good this year is that power play. Dear God, like that's not something I saw happening either. I mean, but Scheifele, he already has 19 power play points. He's beaten his power play total from last year. And yeah, this is a guy I didn't get a hold of at all this year because he's center only. And he was he was getting drafted around like 120 again, like where Natchez is. But yeah, he's just eating out there and crushing. And I think it's fairly sustainable besides the shooting percentage. I think there is a little bit of a drop off coming there. So talk to me about Mark Scheifele and kind of what you think about him so far and then rest of the season.
Yeah, like I didn't draft Mark Scheifele in redraft because again, center only is tough, doesn't put up the best peripherals. Like the leagues that I'm in count hits. But he was my second most drafted player on drafters because I just thought his value was insane. There's no positions on drafters, it's just forward. And, you know, I see a guy that has the potential to have big spike weeks and be a point per game player. So I'm very happy with how he's been doing. Now, I think, like you said, the power play has been one of the biggest factors. Like I was pretty shocked. Scott Arniel put Ehlers on the power play 1. Like that was the best thing ever.
Yeah, and now it's first in the league. I mean, who would have thought this?
Who would have thought? You know, and it seems like they really wanted to integrate Ehlers. They want to keep him, right? Because I think he's in a contract year or something like that. And, he really worked on being in that bumper role on the power play.
Yeah.
And that's been great. I mean, they have the best power play percentage in the NHL. I do think, like you said, there is some, regression potential with Scheifele here.
He's
Just
an efficient player for sure. Like it's not going to
always been a very
crazy.
efficient player. Yeah. He is rocking the highest shooting percentage of his career at 25%, but he typically has like an 18% shooting percentage. So not crazy high, but I'm expecting him to cool down. He's also rocking a 15% on ice shooting percentage as well, which I do think is not sustainable. So, I think we're going to see him cool down, but either way, you have a guy that's getting like heavy minutes on the best power play in the NHL, and you got to be pretty happy with what he's been doing. So, expecting some regression, but I still expect him to be like a 70 point pace type of player for the rest of the year.
The man's a legend. All right, Jared, we need to get give me some of your favorite steals, and then we'll get you out of here. I really appreciate your time, my man.
Yeah, man. We got to talk about Kirill Marchenko. I'm such a big fan of Kirill Marchenko. This year, I wasn't too like, you need to target this guy. Like, I recognize him as like a late round flyer, a late round steal.
Yep.
I was really high on Marchenko 2 years ago, and he kind of just didn't pan out. Like, he was decent 2 years ago. But you're looking at a guy who's like 24, 25 years old, 6'3", good speed, elite skill, powerful shot, likes to shoot the puck. So he's been a guy that I've been eyeing, and this year has definitely exceeded my expectations. I mean, he's on pace for 86 points. And this was sort of a season that we didn't know like what was going to go on with Marchenko, right? Obviously, Gaudreau passing. That's kind of the reason why I backed off on Marchenko a little bit.
Yep.
Because I'm like, okay, what's going to happen with this team, right? Are they going to split the power plays now with 1A, 1B? Like, even to start the year, Marchenko was not on the first power play unit. And I was like, what are you doing? Like, he had the most power play goals for you in 23, 24, but they put him back on, obviously, and we've seen tremendous success. So, I mean, in terms of some of my notes here, I do think we're going to see a little bit of regression from Marchenko, a little bit. 13.8% on ice shooting percentage is pretty high. You have guys like Ken Johnson, who has a pretty high shooting percentage, Voronkov. I do think Werenski, who I'll talk about here in a little bit, is going to see a little bit of regression. So if those guys regress, like, that's going to hurt Marchenko a bit. But I mean, in terms of individual stuff, like, nothing really stands out to me for him. Like, that's not sustainable, right? Like, his shooting percentage is pretty standard. IPP, everything looks good. And obviously, if you watch him, he passes the eye test. So, yeah, he's been an incredible steal. I have him in one of my 2 leagues. I think I might have dropped him in our keeper league, which was just stupid. But, it is what it is.
You dropped him in there because I have him. I guess whoever picked
I think
him up,
I streamed him.
Oh, okay.
I think I streamed him at some point. This was when he wasn't on power play 1, and I was like, oh, whatever. But yeah, that's definitely, I'd have to check. But yeah, that was definitely not a good move if I did that. But yeah, super happy about it, and I'm very interested to see where he goes next year. In drafts. So yeah, that's one guy here. Zach Werenski. Obviously, like, how can we not talk about Zach Werenski, the single greatest value in fantasy hockey right now this year? And I drafted 0% of him in best ball. And listen, like, I know that sounds bad, but he was going super high on like, in redraft. I loved Zach Werenski, like, super big fan of his value, but he was going in the 50s on drafters or the 60s.
They have a good schedule there. Is that what was making that happen?
I think just because it's money, people were more sharp about it. But for me, like, I saw a lot of value in the later rounds. Like, Ghost was going like in the 120 range. So I decided to fade defensemen. Like, I wanted to get those top guys, which didn't really pan out. Dahlin, Hamilton. Dahlin's been fine, but he's been injured a little bit.
Yep.
And then I sort of faded defensemen in that middle range. And that has certainly cost me. Like, I thought, okay, Werenski, that's sort of fair value, a little bit overpriced potentially because of his injury history and sort of the question marks around Columbus, right? Like, are these young players are going to pan out? Ken Johnson, Voronkov, Marchenko. But yeah, that was a big mistake. So, I mean, looking at his point pace, 88 point pace, 26 goal pace, 309 shot pace, which is 4th highest in the NHL. Absolute insane stuff. And we knew this about Werenski. He loves to shoot the puck. He loves to score goals, but in no world did I expect him to be on pace for 90 points. I do think we're going to see a little bit of regression. His shooting percentage is a little bit high, highest IPP of his career, but that can be tricky, right? If he's just an elite player that's going to be driving offense, he's going to have a higher IPP. His ice time is elite. But yeah, I do think we're going to see a little bit of regression, but as long as he stays healthy, I think he's going to be one of the best, if not, top 3 best defensemen in fantasy for the rest of the year.
Yeah, he's in the Norris conversation. That's amazing, right? Because this is a guy that Nate really earmarked, and I got on board with pretty quick. But Nate's always been a big Zach Werenski guy, and I've always liked him just for the potential of 20 goals from the back end. Like I think
Yep.
that's there regardless of his point pace. But yeah, I was exactly in line with you. Although I did get Zach Werenski in a lot of spots. I think I got him on 4 teams, so I love that. But I mean, I wasn't expecting this, right? Columbus, I was obviously concerned about with the passing of John Gaudreau. So, what's his team going to look like? And I think that Dean Evison really has been the key to unlocking these players here, like Marchenko in
Yep.
particular.
Absolutely.
With who was the other guy? Oh God, I can't even remember his name. Pascal Vincent, buddy. Get the hell out of my sight. Basically just crushing all joy of the game.
Yeah.
You play offense, you're good offensively. No. All right, I got to show you kids how to play the right way. It's like, buddy, you know what the right way is? Putting the biscuit in the basket. All right. Give it to Marchenko and let him do stuff. And that's clearly what he's done this year. Lots more ice time for Marchenko. And I love what he's bringing to the table. But Werenski in particular, this guy is driving everything. So he reminds me of Roman Josi, like in his big years. Like everything is going through Zach Werenski offensively. And he's just such a beast. Like he's so dynamic. So I'm a fan of the player. I don't think that an 89-point pace, that would surprise me. But I mean, I think 70 to 75 is a lock at this point. Like he's already at 54 in 50 games.
Yeah, insane stuff from him. I'm going to be interested to see where he goes next year. Hopefully he can continue to stay healthy because that's been a big concern for him. Last year especially burned me because I did draft a lot of Werenski last year and then he got injured. And they're just like, oh my God, he's getting injured again. But just a couple of guys that I wanted to highlight here. Travis Konechny, who in my opinion is a sell high. I really do think he's a sell high player. He's on pace for 93 points, Blake.
Crazy stuff. Yeah.
That is insane. He has a 93% 5v5 IPP. Like again, he could just be so elite that he's driving the offense and that everything's going through him. I get it, but I think that's pretty unsustainable. It was 86% 2 years ago, so maybe he's just that type of player, but that's still like not sustainable. His IPP overall is 88%. He has the highest on-ice shooting percentage of his career, highest shooting percentage of his career. And I do think as well, like with the way that Torts runs the power play, constantly mixing it up, 1A, 1B power play. Like if you look at the last 10 games, he's averaging 2 minutes and 36 seconds of power play time per game, which isn't great. So I just think with these numbers and with the power play not being the best and, being run like that, I think he's going to cool down. I would sell high, even though he's still producing. What are your thoughts on Konechny? Do you think he's also sell high?
Yeah, no, I think he's a clear sell high. I like all your points that you made there. His IPP is insane and not sustainable. He is a high IPP guy, so it's not going to regress like crazy. It's not going to fall off a cliff. But what's more concerning to me is his shots on goal per 60 at 5-on-5. Like he shot 9.12 last year at 5-on-5, and now he's shooting 5.27. Like that's a huge drop off. So he's not shooting and he's not converting very much anymore either. It's just his IPP is insanely high. And what we knew was going to happen this year is what I thought was going to happen. He's cooking on the power play. Like that's what wasn't there last year.
Right. Last year was like 8 power play points last year.
He had more, terrible. Yeah, he had more shorthanded goals last year than he had power play goals. That's insane. Right? Yeah, that's a wild stat. So, I mean, that said, like he's doing well in the power play. I think the even strength stuff is going to start falling off. His shooting percentage is way high, just overall. So, 93 points, no. I would say probably like a 70 to 75 point pace for Travis Konechny is where he lives. But to me, he's really the only option on Philly that I trust. Right. And that goes for Matvei Michkov. Anybody else, like I'm not interested. TK is the only one that I'm feeling comfortable rolling with there. And if you can sell high, that'd be great. But a category league too, I think this is a guy you probably want to hold on to because of that shorthanded stuff. Like if you have any shorthanded points in your category leagues, like this guy's amazing. I've got him on 2 teams, both my category leagues that do count shorthanded points. And yeah, he's ranked something crazy, like 25th in the league on both of those. Cause he also hits pretty well. The shots are down as we said, but he blocks reasonably well. It's just a player that I'm into, but if we're expecting a 93 point pace, no, I don't think so.
Yeah, I completely agree on that. Only Flyers player I really trust, like you said. Another player here is Gabriel Velarde. This was a guy that just made sense, so much sense ADP wise. Like, yes, he's at a disadvantage peripheral wise. The shots aren't there, the hits and the blocks are not there. But you basically had a guy that's locked in to be line 1, power play 1. Like he's a net front guy. He's going to be playing with Scheifele and Connor. it just made so much sense where he was going, which was like 170 or 180 ADP.
Yep.
He's currently on pace for 35 goals and 75 points. Now, I do think we're going to see some regression. Like, he is a very efficient player, typically has a high shooting percentage, but it is the highest of his career at 22%. The honest shooting percentage, similar to what I said with Scheifele, it's 15.45%. So, like, that's pretty unsustainable. But regardless, you have a guy that you got in the later rounds of your draft, line one, power play one on the best power play in the NHL. You can't really complain. He's a streaky player too. He's going to have some big games. And maybe in your fantasy playoffs, he's going to have one of those 4-point, 3-point nights where it propels you to a fantasy chip. So, yeah, pretty happy about Velarde. What are your thoughts on Velarde, if you have any? And then I can continue on with some of these guys here.
Yeah, definitely don't have any Velarde this year, but I mean, it's all about the power play with Velarde, right? Like, his 5-on-5 numbers, not awesome, right? The IPP is reasonable, shots on goal per 60 way down, but the conversion rate is up, shooting percentage is up, and on ice shooting percentage reasonable as well. So it's just the power play, 11 power play goals already in 51 games, 22 power play points. That's a career high. This is the guy that's at the end of passes on the power play, and he's really good at that, right? And that's why his shooting percentage is so high. He's getting high danger chances and he's converting on those. This guy's really good at that. So it's been a nice fit for Velarde there. And I think he's, solidified himself on power play one with this performance. So I think, moving forward, a 70-point pace Velarde, I like that. And then thank you, buddy, for 4 points the other night. Sheesh. He's winning people matchups on their Sunday nights. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I drafted quite a bit of him in best ball, because I just knew those spike weeks were there with him. Didn't expect this, but very, very happy about it. Now, one player here that I think is definitely a player that we need to talk about, which has sort of happened in the last couple of weeks where he's really gone hot, is Lucas Raymond of the Detroit Red Wings. Mm-hmm. He has 23 points in 16 games since the coaching change. And that coaching change has been so massive for this team. They finally put back Kane on power play one. They had that solidified heavy usage for power play one. Mm-hmm. And Raymond's cooking, man. He's on pace for 91 points.
Yeah, I love it.
The problem is, I do think he is a sell high, and I'm sure you agree with this here. He has, how many power play points does he have? 25 power play points, I think, in 50 games. That's not going to sustain. Like, 41 power play point pace, I think that's going to cool down. So that's a big problem for him. On-ice shooting percentage is 14.5%. That's going to cool down. He's a very efficient player. So his shooting percentage, his actual goal scoring, seems to be in line with last year. So maybe that's just the type of player he is. He's not a volume shooter, but he's very efficient. And that's what we're going to see throughout his career. But yeah, I think with the power play being that hot, we're going to see him cool down. But yeah, I still really like what he's doing out there. I drafted quite a bit of him, and it's paying off. I hope he can keep it up, but probably not.
Yeah, I've always been a fan of this player. It's just one of those guys that doesn't really show out in the metrics we look at here at Apples and Genos, like shots on goal per 60, individual scoring chances 4 per 60, but he does show out in those micro stats, right? This is a guy that is driving offense for his line. So, and, like you said, even strength, like the numbers they're reasonable, right? There's nothing blowing the doors down, but it's that power play performance. He's going off. And I agree. I don't think it's sustainable, but I do think that he's a guy that's legit taking a step. And we saw this at the end of last year with the kind of the clutch goals that Raymond was scoring, right? This is a guy who's out there in the last minute of games. He doesn't shy away from big moments. And I'm just a fan of the player. I think that he's going to be a go-to guy there, kind of a 1-2 punch with Dylan Larkin. And like 92-point pace, no, but maybe point per game. I think this is a player that's legitimately taken a step this year. He's almost 23. And I think that this is someone we're definitely going to be interested in next season in our drafts.
Yeah. 22 years old, right? Like this is pretty awesome stuff for his age. Now I don't really have any, like, I know you had Holloway on here. I had some guys I just wanted to talk about very quickly. In terms of being steals this year, just like some of their point paces. Jack Eichel is on pace for 103 points. Eichel, I was a big fan of going into this year. I didn't really talk about him too much in my videos, but he's one of my most drafted players because he was going pretty late, like on drafters and some of these other platforms. Like, I know he's a pure C on some platforms, but this is a guy who, was on, even though the shots are down this year, he was on pace for like 380 shots last year. That just stood out to me, where it's like, I want that advantage peripheral wise. And he's a guy that's just been very good. And what's interesting, though, is he's actually on the worst goal pace since his rookie season. If you're excluding that season where he only played 21 games and he had 2 goals because of that neck injury, he's not scoring goals. So that's been fascinating to me. He's been more of a passer this year. Shots are down, but hey, man, if we start seeing him score more goals, like it's going to be pretty impressive stuff.
It's going nuts on the power play too.
Yeah, the power play's been great, man. Imagine Timo Meyer was on that right side instead of Pavel Dorofeyev.
We can always dream. I love me some Pavel Dorofeyev. Maybe they can all fit together. I don't know.
Yeah, it just
get Barbashev out of there. I know he's not power play one now, but yeah, just slide Timo Meyer in. Let's do it.
Yeah, that would be my ideal situation for Timo Meyer. But in terms of some of these other players, Leon Draisaitl, I think he was pretty good value. He was one of my most drafted players in the first round this year, just because I thought he was going kind of late in some of these drafts. Like he was going like 7 or 8. And I expected to bounce back, and that's what we got. I mean, 57 goal pace this year. He had 41 last year, so a huge bump. Who else is on here? Rickard Rakell, 36 goal pace, 67 point pace. I'm a fan of Raquel. I have him in both of my leagues, actually, both of my redraft leagues. He was going super late. I thought he was a pretty good steal, but I'm pretty sure he is kind of a sellout. I haven't looked at the numbers, but I'm pretty sure like some of his honest shooting percentage stats are pretty unsustainable.
Well, it's all about the power play with Raquel, right? That was the thing. It's like either Rust or Raquel is getting on the power play, but yeah, Raquel has really kind of found himself out there, and this guy's popping the hell off, for God's sake. I mean, big time shooting percentage, but yeah, 68 point pace, 23 goals, buddy. We love it. That's amazing. Good ice time too.
Yeah, and Malkin's out now. So it's like you kind of have a solidified role. You don't have to worry about it, because that was a concern, right? Like I thought Bunting was going to be on power play one to start the year. He wasn't, and now he is, but I mean, I don't know what they're going to do with that power play either, right? Because it's weird. They've been kind of splitting the power plays, which was working, but now, you have these injuries. So yeah, something to look out for. But a couple of other these guys here, Marco Rossi's on pace for 72 points. And I don't know I think we talked about this before we were rolling, but obviously this Kaprizov injury, you could argue it hurts him or it helps him, right? Like playing with Kaprizov is obviously big, even strength, but now he's probably going to be power play one with Kaprizov out. I do think he's a little bit of a sell high player, considering some of his stats like shooting percentage, and the fact that he's not power play one. Like I'm not going to be too excited in the fantasy playoffs when he's not power play one. I don't think he's going to finish with like 72 points, but I could see him finishing with like 65 points, and having like really good even strength protections. So what are your thoughts on Marco Rossi?
Yeah, I would agree. Definitely not really sustainable what this guy's doing, but now that Cap is out, I do think it is a boost for Marco Rossi. I think he's really the only one that's getting a boost. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because Boldy, Jeek, all these guys, you need that Cap access, right? Especially on the power play. But I mean, Rossi's been doing stuff on power play too. So now that he's going to get moved up there, we've seen it's reasonable, right? I think Rossi put together a nice little bit of points there with Cap out. I think Matt Zuccarello is another player that I'm very interested in with Cap out. I think that's a guy that's going to take a much bigger offensive burden, and he ran with it. I think he was the leading scorer of the team when Cap was out. So I don't mind that. But yeah, it's a stinky situation there for the Wild. So yeah. I don't
know. Yeah, definitely, man. Especially with depending on your playoff schedule, I think week 24 is when they have 4 games, 4 off nights. So it's interesting to see what's going to happen there. I definitely want Wild players for that week. Some of these other players, Nikolai Ehlers is on pace for 85 points. This is big. Like him being power play one has been the main driver of this. I think it's somewhat sustainable. I think the power play production is going to cool down. I could see him being like a finish with like 70, 75 points, which is very good with where he was going ADP wise.
Oh yeah.
But what's weird is that he's averaging, I think, even less ice time than last year, despite being power play one. So I guess even strength, like they really aren't giving him a lot of minutes, but hey, he's on power play one now. Like I'm happy.
This is one of those things. Like this is a guy, and I'm trying to identify players like this, like players that don't really have the coach's confidence when the team is up, and trying to defend a lead. And he's one of those guys, right? He's stapled to the bench when they're trying to defend a lead. Winnipeg has been great this year, and they've had the lead in a lot of games. So it kind of makes sense to me. But yeah, just that power play one. This guy is pure offense, and he's really, really elite at that. And so yeah, we're seeing that he needed power play one to really cook. 86 point pace. I'm loving that.
Yeah, and just a couple of more here to fire off. Matt Duchene's on pace for 78 points. I think he's a clear sell high. I'm sure you agree with this, unless he keeps power play one, but I'm pretty sure, like I said earlier, that they took him off there. who else is here? Logan Cooley's on pace for 70 points. And I actually didn't expect this. My main concern was that Barrett Hayden, he's the face-off guy. He's the net front guy. And Cooley typically plays in Keller's spot on the power play. But they've just parked Cooley in front of the net, and he's been good, right? And obviously some of these injuries as well has sort of catapulted his ice time. Like some of the games, I don't know if the last couple of games if I looked at, but last time I checked, he was getting like 18, 19, 20 minutes a game.
20. Yeah, big time minutes for this player.
Yeah, so that's huge. He's obviously a very skilled player. Sean Monahan, before he was injured, was 41 points in 41 games, so 82-point pace. That was incredible. Will be interesting to see what happens next year. Obviously, you have the emergence of Adam Fantilli, but I mean, Monahan's pretty, like, he's a key player as that bumper role on the power play, and even strength, that Voronkov, Marchenko, Monahan line. And now I love those guys, man. They call Adam Fantilli Andre Fantilov or whatever.
I love that.
Yeah, that's great. But we also have Alexi Protas, who's on pace for 68 points, which I think is a clear sell high. Like, extremely unsustainable numbers. That's a sell high. If you own him, please just try to trade him away to get any sort of value. Macklin Celebrini's on pace for 72 points in his rookie year. That's pretty darn good.
He's amazing to watch, man. Have you caught any San Jose games this year?
I've caught like 2.
Yeah.
He looks good.
He's unreal, man. He's very dynamic. And what's funny, like we were talking about Bedard earlier, I think Celebrini has a better situation, like to flourish for offensive production. Like, you know, the guys he's playing with, pretty damn good, you know,
right.
And obviously he's a really dynamic player himself. So that's a guy that we thought he could do something here this year, like 60 to 70 points. And it looks like that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, definitely. Voronkov is also on pace for 66 points. I do think, you know, he's going to cool down a bit, but, you know, he's been a beneficiary of Monahan and Marchenko and that line having so much chemistry. Ken Johnson is also on pace for 70 points. This is also a sell high guy, in my opinion. Even though he's power play 1, even though he's in the top 6 getting good minutes, I do think some of his underlying numbers haven't been great. Some of these like numbers, like shooting percentage, honest shooting percentage is pretty high. But he's been good, right? Like if you picked up Ken Johnson, you're pretty happy about it. And then in terms of some defensemen here, Jacob Chikrin's on pace for 24 goals. That's been very surprising. Like, were you expecting Chikrin to be power play 1? Like I was hoping that, but I thought, okay, typically teams don't run 2 defensemen on the power play. Chikrin's going to be sort of on the sidelines there. Like what were you expecting of Chikrin going into the year?
I was expecting power play 2. I was expecting, like, I was ticked off because Chikrin to me is a power play 1 defenseman, and he's one of these guys that can pop for 20 goals, right? But he needs that opportunity and deployment. And going to Washington behind John Carlson's like, all right, well, here we go again. You know, he's not going to get those minutes. And I was super stoked to see that they kept him out there, and he's really rewarding them. I think, you know, if eventually they do take a defenseman off that power play, it might be John Carlson. I think, you know, John Carlson still has a lot to give in terms of defense. Like defensively, he's great and big minutes for the team. But when you've got a dynamic defenseman who can fire the puck the way Chikrin can, like that's kind of what you need. You know, it's another threat. It's not just Ovechkin on the bumper taking one-timers. Like you rip it up to the point. Chikrin can do that too.
Yeah, I agree. Like Chikrin's been better than Carlson. And, you know, I remember having him on my team back in like 2020 when he was on Arizona, and he was incredible. Yeah. You know, the shots were there and just the goals. And then just 2 more defensemen here. Lane Hudson on pace for 65 points as a rookie. Obviously, he's not a guy that's going to put up a lot of shots, hits or blocks, but like incredible stuff from Lane Hudson. And I didn't expect this, right? Like I knew he had the talent. Like if you look at his college numbers, he had a better points per game than, you know, Adam Fox, Luke Hughes, Cale Makar, like some of these elite players. But I didn't expect this so soon.
Yeah. All this guy's been doing his whole career is proving people wrong, right? Like he's a small guy in stature. Even going into this year, like people like you, myself, are like, no, I don't see it. Like I projected him for 40 points this year because I thought, yeah, they'll warm him up, right? You know, get him on power play 2. I did not expect him taking over power play 1. And he's really running with it. Like this guy's, he's like a Quinn Hughes. Like when he walks the line, that's what he looks like. This guy's insanely dynamic. And I think we do have to shout out Mike Matheson. This is a guy that's been getting a lot of like hate online. And it's crazy to me because Lane Hudson doesn't have the season he's having without Mike Matheson there to sort of like as a safety net, you know, and as a teammate, right? Like, okay, they're identifying that Hudson is this offensive force and Matheson can do that as well. but he's taking a step back and being that defensive presence to let Hudson cook, and that's really been nice. One big thing about Hudson that I think was always a good sign is the coach trusts him to put him out there for minutes. Like a lot of these young defensemen, they put them out there for like 15 sheltered minutes. You know, they're getting offensive minutes, just sheltered. Well, not Lane Hudson. He's averaging 22 and a half minutes on the season. That's a really good sign to me. That means he's not like just ridiculous defensively out there. Like he's actually somewhat defensively sound. I mean, I don't want to oversell it with Lane Hudson, but he's okay out there. He's like not really hurting the team, especially with Matheson out there, and they trust him for big minutes. So you get an offensive player like this, power play one, and really good deployment. Yeah, we got a powder keg here that's ready to blow. 65 points. If he hit that, I mean, that's a real like he's in the Calder conversation, no question. Like, and I don't know, like he might be one of the front runners if he can hit 65 points.
Yeah, I mean, I think the minutes are something I didn't expect, and I think that's what you should do with the young player. I know you're trying to win, you're trying to sell tickets, but I think you need players to get those minutes under their belt and allow them to make mistakes. That's how you need to learn. And yeah, defensively he's had some struggles, but overall he's been solid. And his head fakes per 60 is pretty impressive as well.
Ridiculous, juking everybody out of their jocks.
But one last guy I wanted to talk about here, and then if you have any other players, feel free to talk about them. Jake Wallman. Now, Wallman is kind of slowed down a little bit, but overall, this guy was getting like undrafted or drafted super late. And like right now, he's on pace for 57 points and he's a guy that likes to shoot the puck and puts up hits and blocks as well. So the plus minus, I didn't check, but I'm sure it's not like the best.
He's +2, which is actually a surprise.
That is very surprising. He's a guy that you want to trade away and also include a second round pick for. Like that made a lot of sense. Very, very impressive stuff from Yzerman or Yzerman.
What was that? Seriously, like you just, I mean, it didn't make a bit of sense, but
definitely a tough one, but obviously like super good value. You know, I think regression was to be expected. Like we're kind of seeing that regression hit a bit, but I think he's going to be good for the rest of the year.
Yeah. And in category leagues, my goodness, this guy just had a 9-block game. I mean, geez, what the heck? I mean, he's a block machine, and he's getting power play one for the most part. So they've been doing some interesting things there. Like it's not a lock for him on power play one, but I mean, it has been as of late. And I think I like what I'm seeing there. This is a really fun player and a guy you got for a song. You could have got him off waivers, right? So, and I don't have Jake Wallman anywhere. I lament that, but he's cooking 57-point pace. No, 50-point pace Wallman with these insane periffs, I think is an absolute smash at his ADP.
Yeah, I'm definitely a fan. I hope you can keep it up.
Absolutely, buddy. All right. This is a beefer episode, buddy. I'm here for it. I could talk about this crap all day, man, and I'm happy to. So I really appreciate your time, Jared. Before we get out of here, why don't you just talk about Fired Up Fantasy and what you're doing there, what your fans and some of our listeners can expect from you rest of the season and where they can find you.
Yeah, Twitter handle, YouTube handles at Fired Up Fantasy. We also have a Discord community that I'm trying to grow. That's like in my description. But yeah, I mean, what we're going to do for the rest of the year is just doing the must-add videos, the weekly guides, doing some buy low, sell highs. I mean, I think this video was pretty solid for kind of identifying some of those players, but I'll be doing one soon. I'm going to do a playoff schedule video soon for you guys. I know people have been asking for that. It is a lot of work. It is a lot of work, and there's a lot of things to look at. So that will be coming out sometime in February. And another thing as well is like drafters, as you guys know, like I was doing those live streams, we're going to be doing playoff best ball, which probably comes out in April-ish. So I'm going to be doing live streams of that and trying to win the playoff best ball stuff. But yeah, man, I appreciate you having me on. I know this was a long episode. I love talking fantasy hockey. I would love to do it again. And yeah, it's been a good time, man.
Oh, hell yeah, man. Thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate that. How are your drafters teams doing? Because, yeah, you went all in there, and I saw like some of your numbers you're crushing over there.
Well, it started off really good. I had like 10 teams in the top 50. It's cooled down, but now we're starting to get back up a little bit. I drafted 115 teams. I have 5 in the top 100 and 2 in the top 50. But I just don't think any of them are going to be the winners. I was talking to Nate about this, or I was mentioning it in Discord. Like he has this one team that is absolutely insane. One of Nate's teams, I think it's like 5th or 6th right now. And he has Nate just on that team, right? So it just received a huge bump. Yeah. So I was looking at that team and I'm like, I'm not winning this shit, man. I'm not winning this. But we'll see, man. But it's been really fun. Like I said earlier, I think best ball is the future of fantasy sports. I love it. It's what I love doing. So, yeah, I think playoff best ball is when I'm going to redeem myself. But we'll see. We'll see. Some of the teams have potential. So, yeah, it's been good.
Yeah, buddy, you're crushing over there. Like I watched a lot of your videos, like your drafts and stuff, just because best ball is not my thing. I'm trying to make it more my thing. Like I dug in a little bit this year, and my plan this offseason is to get in even more, like with the schedule matrix and all that stuff, and like spreading out your picks and stuff like that. But you're doing a great job. You're doing a great service to the fantasy community, and we're happy to have you here, buddy. Really appreciate that, Jared. And thank you, listeners, for your service. We are going to be cooking with some more content here this week. And then Nate and I are getting to biz this weekend with our waiver wire show, flagship show, all that business. So until then, celebrate your day. Bye for now.
Awesome. That was great.
Yeah, that was good. Whoopsies. Hold on. We're still going. Press the wrong button. Yeah.